In the aftermath of the Vietnam War, there was a flurry of activity in the U.S. aviation community, and the Air Force launched the lightweight fighter program that eventually led to the F-16. The losing design, the YF-17 Cobra, was chosen by the Navy to be the basis of a new naval fighter that was intended to replace several types of previous aircraft by using one airframe for multiple missions. The hope was that it could be developed into a new jet that could perform air superiority, ground attack, and reconnaissance all in one platform. Those hopes actually worked out pretty well. Some of the main reasons for the Navy going with the YF-17 are really that they wanted a twin-engined aircraft and a wider landing gear base, which were both seen as basically mandatory features for carrier aircraft. The new jet, named the F-18 Hornet, ended up being pretty dramatically different from the YF-17 it was based on, with only the general shape being carried over. The internal structure was reworked to add more fuel, all the usual carrier features were added, like folding wings and an arrestor hook, and a new fly-by-wire system was integrated. Additional ground attack capability was added as well, giving the aircraft the F-A designation. Since it was based on an existing design, the F-A-18's development was fairly smooth, with the first plane flying in late 1978. Since the jet was a completely new system for the Navy, it took a little longer than expected to get pilots trained and the logistics in place for deployment, and the first squadrons weren't fully operational until 1983. Over the years, the F-A-18 series has distinguished itself in service with many nations and proved its multi-role capabilities during the first Gulf War, where it flew sorties attacking both land and air targets at the same time. While the original models have been phased out of service with the U.S. Navy, they're expected to fly with the U.S. Marines and foreign operators well into the 2030s. What we get in War Thunder is the F-A-18A, a jet fighter in the American tech tree at battle rating 12.3 for air and 12.0 for ground. This jet gets a full ballistics computer, including the EEGS, and gets a modern radar warning receiver with really good performance. One possible deficiency is a somewhat limited supply of countermeasures compared to a few of the other planes at this BR, but it's usually enough if you're careful. Its radar is the AN-APG-65Q, an I-band set with a full set of modern features including track-wall scan, multiple look-down modes, and a high-angle dogfight ACM frame. The loadouts include 3 different air-to-air missiles, guided glide bombs, a targeting pod, and a whole menu of dumb bombs and rocket pods for ground attack. The dogfight missile you get is the AIM-9L, either as tip winders or double racks under the wings. This is an all-aspect infrared missile with good performance, but no infrared countermeasures. The radar missiles are the AIM-7F and M. Both use semi-active radar homing, and both have fairly average performance for this BR, with the only difference between them that the 7M has a very slightly upgraded seeker that can gimbal a little bit further, which makes it slightly harder to dodge while it's still in a good energy state. Your guided bomb is the AGM-62A. This is a TV-guided version of the Walleye glide bomb. It's got surprisingly good range for what it is, and a good warhead, but remember it's unpowered, so if you drop it from higher altitude or longer distances, it can take quite a while to impact the target. The flight performance of the F-18A has a few standout metrics, but also a couple of huge caveats. First, it gets the new setting to disable the AOA limiter. I'm just going to tell you straight up that you don't actually need it with this jet. The high alpha performance of the F-18 is already insane, and the A model we're looking at here can outpull almost anything in its BR bracket without any help. There's a catch though, and it's a big one. The price you pay for the high alpha performance is that when you're pulling one of those high angle turns, the bottom of your plane starts to act as an air brake against the oncoming air, just as if you had turned off the AOA limiter. But it's not as pronounced as if you actually hit the button. This is an issue for all planes with high AOA performance, but It's especially noticeable with the A model Hornet, as its engine power is only average, or maybe a tiny bit above average for this bracket, which means that if you get into it with something like a J7E, yes, you can swing your nose around a little faster and get the shot, but don't miss, because you might be completely out of energy and it's going to take a while to recover. Don't forget that some of the jets in this bracket do have a slightly better thrust-to-weight ratio, so they're going to get out of low energy states a little bit quicker. The rate of climb is still fairly good, and the maximum speed at most altitudes is going to be well below its aerodynamic redline. In typical War Thunder match conditions, you're rarely going to take this jet above about Mach 1.15, and even then, only up at higher altitude. Taking the A-18A out into air battles gives you some multi-role flexibility, but I'm going to say plainly that after you're done spading the jet, don't bother with ground attack in air battles. The plane's performance is heavily tilted to favor air combat, and frankly, it's one of the best jets at this BR for air combat, so don't waste that potential doing bombing runs. Now, with that out of the way, there are still a couple of things to think about. High-altitude BVR jousting with the A-model Hornet is viable, but it depends heavily on what you're up against. The Sparrows it has aren't the fastest weapons at its BR, so you're gonna need to make sure you get the first shot off. In fact, you might need to use your first shot mostly as a throwaway to force a defensive maneuver out of your opponent so that you can push and use a second closer shot for the actual kill. Unfortunately, this Hornet only carries 4 Sparrows anyway, which kind of makes each individual weapon pretty valuable and perhaps too valuable for a yeet shot. It depends on your playstyle. I personally had the most fun with this jet, using it in fairly conventional low and medium altitude on-meta dogfighting. It's only got an average supply of countermeasures, just 60 charges, so you may run out occasionally, especially in big furballs. But generally speaking, the insane agility of the Hornet, combined with its good radar set and credible missiles, makes this plane incredibly lethal in 1v1 engagements, and it can still be effective in larger dogfights. The only real caveat is that the cyclic rate on the cannon is still insane, so you're going to burn through all the ammo very quickly if you're not careful. Now, if you want to use the A-18A as close air support, you might find it surprisingly limited. With only 2 guided bombs and fewer countermeasures than most other jets at the top tier, its overall combat potential per sortie isn't great. As of making this video, ground BRs still max out well below air BRs, so a lot of higher-end 4th generation jets are down-tiered to the same level as this thing is out over a ground battle. So you get to worry about active radar missiles, Eurofighters, and the Panzer at the same time, which can be a pretty challenging situation for this jet. I can't really recommend this one too strongly for close air support. Visually, the Hornet is a beautiful aircraft, and it's always been one of my favorites, but I've got a huge gripe. As of making this video, no in-game Blue Angel skin for the A-18A. Jet ruined, literally unplayable. The skin is in the files, and it's even got number 5, but for whatever reason, it's not accessible yet. Come on, Snail, get on that. Anyway, the landing performance of the jet is pretty basic, and I'd generally consider it easy to set down. You can put the gear out at almost 700 kilometers an hour, and the flaps up to about 450, and really the only caveat is that it's got an arrestor hook instead of a drag chute. The cockpit is excellent. Huge MFDs, good visibility, and a useful heads-up display with most of the instruments being pretty easy to get at. My only real gripe is that the radar warning receiver is lower than I prefer, but I still had a blast with this thing in VR. To close out on the A-18A. This jet has outstanding dogfight agility, it's got a good radar set for its BR, and it has a pretty solid set of weapons. However, the cannon runs out of ammo pretty quick, It can run out of countermeasures in longer matches, and it can dump all of its airspeed in high AOA maneuvers if you're not careful. The final verdict on the A-18A is that this jet is very much on meta for air battles, and it can be a primary grinder for a good chunk of the American tech tree if you're not finished with that yet. The only area where it might struggle is close air support. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to like this other one.